there was specifically an article written by Jason Schreier. And what he did is he put together kind of a breakdown, sort of a post-mortem of what exactly happened with Redfall, the development, whose idea was this, and why it didn't work out. And it's actually pretty telling. There's a lot. What are your overarching thoughts on this, Jor, before we get into the nitty gritty?
I think we should get into give some extra context first for people who are like not familiar about the article Jason put up.
Yeah, so basically in the article he begins by going through, I'm sorry, Jor, in this circle your face is like slightly off angle. I'm terribly sorry. It's like slightly cropped.
Don't worry.
But in this, so what he did is he broke down all of the details surrounding the early phase of development. He explains how, of course, it hasn't been received super well. It's in the mid 50s on Metacritic, which puts it lower than games that everybody agree are just terrible. It's been certainly one of the year's worst reviewed games, and a major disappointment. Even Phil Spencer said in his interview he did with Kind of Funny Games, he said that, quote, the game rated significantly lower than our internal metrics. And apparently what they had done is they had done internal reviews, which maybe, Jor, you can speak to how this works, because I don't really have an understanding of it. It sounds like they hired either journalists to do mock reviews or people inside the company to do mock reviews. Those mock reviews put it, I believe in the interview, he said double digits higher than it ended up being. And at the time of that video, or of that interview, it was at like low to mid 60s on Metacritic. So he thought this was going to at least be a 7 out of 10, maybe even 8 out of 10.
Yeah, so I think from my understanding, the mock reviews are like mostly, we sometimes hear, for example, from media people that get let go, unfortunately, or stop at working at a website or something. And one of the things they end up doing is, work as a mock reviewer for like a company that has contacts with every like big publisher. So they get like this contract. Hey, we have this upcoming game. Do you have some mock reviewers? And so those are people that used to work for websites, so they have scored games before, and they get like an extra early version of the game. But that is kind of the issue where I think if they get an early version of the game, there are a lot of caveats where it's like, okay, but this is the day -1 patch, I would imagine, because they get the game even before the reviewers. And sometimes when the reviewers get the game, you always have like the day 1 patch to worry about, where it's like those issues that you have, they will be fixed at launch, and then you kind of have to hope that they are like telling the truth. So I think that probably happened, where a lot of mock reviewers got the game and were like, this doesn't look right, and then maybe Microsoft was like, yeah, but that will be fixed, which ended up maybe not happening. So that's kind of my take on it. I still think if Phil, out of his, of course he has a busy day, but it's like you're one of your biggest like, bro, if only like Redfall and Starfield hit this year, it is like his second biggest launch of the year. Take a half an hour out of your day to because he's always like, I'm a gamer as well, and we know like he has like, I think, a public achievement page and stuff like that. If he played this game for an hour himself, he would have known. So I think this is like kind of weird to say for one of your biggest launches. But yeah, that's kind of my take.
I mean, I totally agree. I think it's just baffling that even with patches, I think Redfall is still high 60s, like maybe low 70s, with everything working well. It's just not a very good game, but it's clear that they just kind of were viewing this as a remnant of before Xbox took over. So they were just like, okay, let's just get it out and move on. And really what was most telling about this article, and what I found to be extremely interesting, were the descriptions of the development team and basically their reactions to the potential acquisition. So they describe a very troubled development process where basically in 2018, ZeniMax, the large privately held owner of Bethesda Softworks, who owns Arcane, they were looking to sell themselves, get out with that fat stack, and they decided that they were going to start pushing some of their biggest studios to get into games as a service and live service titles to boost revenue, to look more appealing to potential acquirers, and to get a fatter stack when they eventually sold. And this is why I thought back in the day that they were probably preparing to sell, because the management hadn't changed at ZeniMax or Bethesda Softworks, and yet all of a sudden they were acting super greedy with Fallout 76 and all of this other stuff they were doing with the creation.
Wolfenstein Youngblood.
Yeah, Wolfenstein Youngblood, with the Creation Club, with all of those paid mods, all of that stuff came at the same time. So it was clear in 2018 they were changing their strategy, which means the motivation has shifted. But what Redfall is Redfall is a remnant of that same period. It was ideated back in 2018, and they started work on it as a big live service game from a well-known studio that would print them money. And as the years ticked by, eventually they got sold to Microsoft, but nothing changed. The game was still foundationally built to be a live service title. And so as the years went on, they would try to get rid of it, but it didn't really help. So for example, as you can see here, only in 2021, with games as a service growing more controversial among gamers, did Arcane finally scrap its unwieldy in-game monetization plans. So in 2021, after 3 years in development, they decided to cut out the in-game store and all that stuff. And I don't know about you, but I am fascinated and I'm very curious as to what that original monetization looked like. Because already they have plans for like separate paid characters that they're bringing through, basically like DLC where you can buy a new character and stuff like that.
I mean, there were outfits, right? There were like,
Outfits.
I would not be surprised if many of the outfits that we saw now as rewards, like the fireman or like they had like, yeah, stuff like that. I would not be surprised if they were like store exclusive at first. So they did not even have a lot of base game outfits. That would be my take on it. I think there are a lot of interesting things. Also, what you say that only in 2021 they started to change the game, while like one of the developers was saying from moment one we did not want a store. Like he lied.
Yeah, that's a lie. Yeah.
In an interview, he was like playing the good guy, while the whole intent for this game was to like be monetized to that. I think there's a lot to take away from it. Like at one point, the Redfall stuff, I think we should like continue on that, but also like the bigger picture with live service as a whole and the whole Sony thing we've been talking about. You could even throw Suicide Squad in there. Basically, all these single player studios that at one point hear from their upper management, you're not making enough money. We see Fortnite, we see Destiny. They sell a skin for $20. That's 1/3 of the game, and that skin is made in a day by an artist. Of course, takes longer, but versus what a game costs to make and stuff, that's a way better profit. So, hey, you go do that as well. And then they kind of forget that it's way harder than that. And they also mentioned in this article, they had only or less than 100 developers. They still had some support studios, but there were tasking to make a game like Far Cry or Borderlands that is made by like 1,000 people in total, like by the end of the development cycle, and they were doing it with a way smaller team. And that's what you saw with this game. A lot of things were reused. You go to this safe house. Oh, it's the same puzzle. You go kill this vampire. Oh, it's the same like sort of enemy layout. They reused a ton of stuff because they just did not have the manpower to make this game what the upper management envisioned. And it's just so interesting how, like, what would Bethesda be if Microsoft did not buy them? They would be in serious trouble, right?
Yeah.
Because their last profitable game, I still think, apart from Elder Scrolls Online, that I think is just chugging along, making some money here and there, is Fallout 4, 2015. Fallout 4 sold gangbusters, and they can probably ride on that for a long time. But they really made some poor decisions. And I think the big thing also here from this article is that you expect Microsoft, you buy this freaking company to come in, look at everything that is in development, and play it and see and hear from developers like, how can Jason interview 12 people that worked on this game and hear way more than what seems like Phil Spencer had heard? Because if he heard the same things where 70% of the developers from Arcane Austin, so they of course made Prey, super like beloved single player game. I did not like it that much, but a lot of people did. It was certainly very unique. We need more games like that. But yeah, instead they were going to make Redfall, and a lot of people working on that team were like, screw this, I don't want to make this multiplayer game, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So by the end of the development cycle of Redfall, they lost 70% of their developers.
Yeah, which
So-
just like think about for everybody out there, whether you work at like a coffee shop or you work like I worked at a Best Buy store for a while, and they regularly would have maybe like in one department, maybe there were 10 people that would rotate in and out. Just think of 7 out of those 10 people leaving in the span of a single project. I mean, that is devastating. It's why people, like I saw people say, oh, they just need to, after Redfall, go back, make Prey 2 and everything will be fine. For one, Prey was considered a financial failure. It's a bummer to admit it, but it just is the fact of reality. It just didn't make money. Neither did Dishonored 2, apparently. And if I recall correctly, I think Dishonored 2 also had a really broken PC launch as well. So they've had a few releases that...
I mean, Arcane games never sell. Like, Deathloop did not sell well. They had like 5 million players after launching on PS Plus Extra and Game Pass. Like, those games, while critically acclaimed, we care about them, but just the wider audience that really needs to care about them to make it profitable doesn't.
Well, and that's why, like, saying they just need to go back to Prey, like, they just can't. Originally, Austin's office employed less than 100 people. If 70% of those people leave, you have 30 people left who were on the original team, and that includes like the upper executives and game directors who stayed through the whole project. Like, a lot of the talented level designers, a lot of the coders, the artists, they're just gone. They went to another studio in Austin. There's plenty over there, or they went and traveled somewhere else for a different job. You can't just get those people back. This is why this sort of short-sighted, I guess, approach to game releases is just so toxic in the industry, because ZeniMax effectively destroyed one of their biggest and most powerful studios because they just wanted to try to come in quick. It's crazy.
Because especially with Game Pass, having a Prey that is a 9 out of 10, that or for people like that will get people to subscribe, and not a game like Redfall. I think Kush made an interesting donation there, so thanks a lot for that. Should I read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Hey Luke and Joe Raptor, do you think this Redfall situation could happen to Sony studio like Naughty Dog? Could the devs not be interested in working on the live service titles and want to focus on single player? So that's, I think, like a nice segue to the broader picture here. Something we've been seeing for a long time, like with BioWare making Anthem, like Suicide Squad and Rocksteady. There's like another studio that also made like a big like service that also flopped. But there are many, like, and now we heard, I think you already discussed it in the video, right? The Last of Us situation. So for people who are not familiar, of course, last year during Summer Game Fest, Naughty Dog finally properly revealed their Last of Us project, Last of Us multiplayer project. It was first part of part 2, but then they had bigger ambitions, so thought, let's spin it off. And Sony, as you might know, they want to launch 12 live service games before April 2026. So they were like, yeah, sure, let's do it with one of our biggest IP. But now we heard the news that also they wanted to do it the Naughty Dog way, but now Bungie comes in. Sony, of course, bought Bungie to make sure that their live service games are like on track. they of course have a ton of experience with Destiny. They were looking at this Last of Us project and like, you can't retain players for the long haul, and that's what you want, because if people stay in the game for longer, they tend to spend more as well. So that game is now also getting a skeleton team from the sounds of it. Many people that worked on the Last of Us multiplayer are now going to other projects inside Naughty Dog, which includes a single player game. I'm not sure if people that worked at Naughty Dog on that multiplayer game did not want to work on it. Did not sound like that to me. But yeah, we of course don't know the full story. I think they were like, thought it was like a cool challenge. And I think also a lot of like these teams, I think a lot of people want a successful multiplayer game. But that's why I think Sony's approach to buy new studios, to have them do it instead of go to Santa Monica and be like, from now on, you're a God of War co-op team or a co-op studio, is a smarter approach. Because I hope, even though we know Sony will have like 60% of their investment going into live service in the coming years instead of single player games, that the teams that want to make single player games and that are known for that will just continue to do that, while Haven with like fair games, they can do that and hopefully it succeeds. And if not, we did not lose a single player game for it. That's kind of, I think, to end kind of my point. The sad thing also with Redfall, we could have had another Prey. With Suicide Squad, we could have had another Batman Arkham game. Now we're not getting them because they're all chasing that live service money.
Yeah. Well, and with going back to the Naughty Dog thing, the reason I think the Naughty Dog situation is a little different is because Naughty Dog seemingly was doing their own Naughty Dog approach to a live service game, which Bungie didn't think worked, which is why it's basically been put in the freezer. Whereas a team like Arcane Austin with Redfall, they were forced to do the most generic live service game possible. And when I say forced, I mean like the executives and upper management decided this is what we're doing. And there's a reference in the article where the devs started to get really, really frustrated because they just kept getting pushed, and they had things that were being pointed to like, oh, we need to make games like, I'm trying to find the exact examples that they gave, like Far Cry and Borderlands. Like this is the exact quote. Staff members said that over time they grew frustrated with management's frequent shifting references to other games such as Far Cry and Borderlands that left each department with varying ideas of what exactly they were making. Throughout development, the fundamental tension between single player and multiplayer design remained unresolved, and the game directors did not respond to comment on this point. And it just, goes to show, when you try to take everything as inspiration, you end up with something super generic and uninteresting, and that is Redfall. That's what it is. It's just a game that tried to be everything all at once. None of the devs really knew what they were doing or why they were doing it. It didn't have a clear vision because the managers kept saying, well, Borderlands makes money, let's do Borderlands. Oh, so does this game, and Far Cry, let's do that. And they just kept bouncing around, and that's no way to create a piece of art. You have to have a little vision.
Yeah, I'm curious what they're gonna do next, because again, of course they hired new people, but yeah, they were looking at one point for people that wanted to make multiplayer shooter games. So now you have this really weird studio with some like a skeleton crew of the original team that wanted to make a single player game, and the new hires that were brought in to make a multiplayer shooter. Go make a game together, guys. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, and one of the most interesting things that they also mentioned in the article was how they really struggled to attract talent early on, because basically when the team decided that they were going to do Redfall, a lot of the veterans started to leave because like, screw that. I don't want to make a co-op multiplayer game. That sounds terrible. So they bailed and they had to hire new people. But because the game hadn't been announced yet, they had to just send off basically job postings publicly and interview people. And all the people who were interviewing were like, oh, this is for Arcane Austin. They made some of my favorite games like Prey. I'm going to get to make a Prey-like game. And then they got in, if they got hired, and they're like, wait, we're making what? Yeah, it was a bit of a wake-up call. So I think what Xbox should do is if they deem the team of high enough quality that they could make a quality game again, I think they should try to reignite that passion and just ask the
Yeah.
devs, what do you really want to do? And we will support you in that. What do you want to
Yeah,
do?
Yeah, I think that's the best approach, and for Game Pass in particular, because game sales don't matter. Quality matters for Game Pass.
Yeah.
So if it's a game that people want to make, I think Grounded is a great example. I think that was a game that they wanted to make. So, and that's like a smaller project, like go do it. I think that was profitable for them, like because I think only a small team worked on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very interesting. And yeah, regarding, we will have to wait and see. I'm just curious what the end of the, because like Sony feels like already way too late to the party with their live service approach. Also the fair games sort of thing, like all the games they
yeah.
announced during the PlayStation Showcase. I don't know, man. It's
That-
gonna be at least interesting.
He took my thing.